Increased global development has meant a skyrocketing of the trash we produce. The World Bank estimates that by 2050, we will generate 3.88 billion tons of waste each year. That's a 73% increase from 2020. Kate O'Neill is a professor and author who has explored the international trade of waste and the challenges of governing it. O'Neill is a professor at the University of California-Berkeley, and she studies the global governance of waste and recycling. What got you so interested in waste?
I think for a lot of people who study waste and are involved in it, it's right from childhood. So I was someone who picked up the litter in the playground and really enjoyed taking trash to the tip or the landfill with my parents. That's how you kind of got rid of the big stuff. And also recycling. My mom was a very early recycler, so we would take all the bottles and papers to this place and sort them. So that became part of my growing up. And then as I moved into graduate school, I realized that there was a big global problem around waste. And as someone who's interested in environmental politics, I started looking at that and moved on from there. But what I like about waste is it's a window into the world.
O'Neill is the author of several books, including Waste, which examines the global political economy of waste over the past 2 decades. There's an interconnectivity when it comes to waste. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I think people just think, I put it out on the curb and it gets taken away and they don't think about it anymore. But pretty much every kind of waste you can think of can cross borders. And that would be anything from used electronics gets shipped to Africa where it can be refurbished or burnt and incinerated and dumped, or plastics or paper have traditionally gone to China. They don't anymore. Even clothes, cars, food waste, even some of that can be shipped in different ways, everything. And now we actually even look at waste in space. So our waste goes everywhere, it's connected, and that global nature of waste is one thing that really has me hooked in terms of something to study.
The thing, I started thinking when I was reading your book about income inequality, how that's such a big issue. You're listening, these people up here have so much, and these people down here are struggling. And then you kind of look at it from a global standpoint. There are countries that are doing very well. I'm going to shove my waste, I'm going to offload it to somebody else. Can you talk about that?
Mm-hmm. That's been that's kind of a long tradition, the international waste trade. Again, in the 80s, we started to be aware of it, and you'd have European countries sending just old ash and barrels of toxic sludge to cities or towns in Africa where they would just be dumped. And you realize that this was a really serious problem. It happened also in Europe. West Germany would put its waste over the border into East Germany back in the day, so that was also a problem for them. And we realized that this is a problem that needs to be stopped, and there was consensus around the global community that, of course, it's a bad problem. So that was where we had a first international treaty on regulating the waste trade. I think what we didn't understand then was that actually, although we were thought we were shipping our waste overseas, in fact, there are markets for it in many different countries. So it's not just dumping. There are groups, people, entities who want to bring in waste that they can refurbish, recycle, and sell for a profit. So it's not just dumping anymore. And I think that's really upended how we think about the waste trade.
Plastics can take anywhere from 20 to 500 years to decompose. Even then, they never fully disappear, but just become smaller and smaller particles. According to the United Nations, only about 9% of plastic in the world is recycled. Like other waste, plastic moves around the world in the highly interconnected waste trade. China at one point said time out.
Yep.
And that changed things, didn't it?
It really changed things. I think nobody realized until really 2017 when China made this announcement that they were in fact accepting around half of the world's plastic and paper scrap, everything that was put into the blue bin. And that was because the companies in the US would pick it up, bundle it, and sell it on and make revenue. it got to the point where so much plastic was being shipped to China that we had not bothered to build recycling facilities here. We relied on China. So it became this place where we shipped our plastics. And initially that was fine. China's roaring economy had a use for them. The plastics were better quality. But over time, everyone just started getting sloppy, and they would send contaminated plastics, mixed bales, and the Chinese government was like, this is not worth it anymore, and we don't want to be seen as the world's dumping ground. So they announced a halt. It was Operation National Sword came into force in March 2018, and the recycling industry here was upended, both in crisis, but to be honest, they also saw it as a tremendous opportunity to start rebuilding recycling facilities here, and also for many people to really highlight the problem of waste plastics that we can't deal with.
You've described it, but give me a sense of the shock waves. When you have someone who's absorbing and suddenly they say, I'm not going to, as you said, it upends things. Give us an idea of how it changed things.
Right. Well, in a very literal way or very visual way, plastic started piling up at sorting yards and being sent to landfill. I could go and see a landfill, or actually not a landfill, but a materials recovery facility, which is where recycling materials are sorted. And you just see these bales and bales of plastics just kind of sitting there in these yards with nowhere to go. So that represented a huge loss of money for these folks without being able to send it on. For recyclers, and for companies, and for cities and towns, they had to suddenly change their policies. So for many cities, they just stopped collecting plastics altogether from households, so that went into the trash. And we started to talk globally about how do we think about regulating plastic waste and stopping it from becoming such a problem. But the other shockwave that it had was that the companies exporting waste started to export to Southeast Asia, countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and lower quantities, but that was one of the kind of unexpected knock-on effects of China's actions.
The plastic problem worsened during the COVID-19 pandemic with the rise of personal protective equipment, or PPE, and other single-use plastics. Few plants like these exist to recycle COVID-related plastics, including face masks. One study from 2021 found that 26,000 tons of pandemic-related plastic waste had leaked into the ocean. Kate, COVID changed things, right? How so?
COVID was, I think, a seismic event in so many ways. But in the waste world, what happened very quickly was that people got really nervous about the hygiene and the potential contamination of the things that they used every day. And they started to the plastics industry and packaging firms caught onto this. So all of a sudden we had plastic bags in supermarkets. They got rid of reusable cups. And so people started ordering like masses of stuff for home use, as we all did, covered in plastic. And then we had mask waste. Billions of masks littering the world now, and test waste and all of those things that came with dealing with the pandemic, and all over the place, because a lot of that stuff used to be just purely in hospital.
You write here is, plastics are not the instantaneous cataclysm of nuclear war, nor the slow-rolling violence of climate change. We're uncertain of their long-term effects, which I think we all agree on. Mm-hmm. But most of us also agree that there are going to be long-term effects. As you look at it, and this is part of one of the things you also talk about here is governance and policy, and it's everywhere, and how do you really address it? What do you think are going to be the long-term effects, and what should be done in terms of policing and policy?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's like the $42,000 question. Well, I think that we need to turn off the tap for plastics. We're becoming more and more aware of just even the climate impacts of plastics. That was not as visible or as well studied when I wrote the book. So they're going to be a massive climate problem. We realize that. we realize that fossil fuel industry is just as implicit in production of plastics as they are in petroleum and gas. So that's one thing. I think more and more studies show that plastics are showing up in every part of our bodies, in our hair, in our blood, and also just being carried up through the food chain. And so they are everywhere. And I think that turning off the tap is the first step. I think cleaning up is going to be hard. I don't know anyone who's doing that well yet on a large scale. And then as far as laws go, one of the really exciting things for those of us who are interested in international politics is there's a new international plastics treaty that's being negotiated right now. And that is receiving a lot of support from different countries around the world, activist groups, even industry, depending, they have their own interests, but they are engaged and they want something. So I feel like that's going to be a very positive development.
The United Nations is negotiating an international plastics pollution treaty that would legally bind nations to stop the growth of plastic waste, which is expected to nearly triple by 2060. Short of an international agreement, nations have already tried to tackle the problem. In 2021, China banned single-use, non-degradable plastic bags in major cities. The country set a goal of phasing out most single-use plastics by 2025. In 2022, India issued a ban of 19 different plastic items from cups and straws to ice cream sticks. And in the United States, the country's Environmental Protection Agency rolled out a 2020 plan to increase recycling from 32 to 50% in the next decade. Plastic bags, plastic straws, a lot of focus on both. Why do you think that is? Because for the longest time, it seemed like, no one was talking about it, and suddenly everybody was talking about it. And they were trying to figure out ways, how do we stop this?
Yep. That became very visible, especially in recent years. Plastic bags have always been a thing. But straws, to the extent that they became used, or plastic cups from, cafes and Starbucks and all of those places, suddenly became very visible and became something that consumers could worry about. So it became an easy place for activist groups, for kids, and for policymakers to say, hey, we need to make a stand on what we call single-use disposable plastics and single-use disposable foodware. And so this visibility enabled a lot of different policy measures, like bans on plastic bags, replacing straws with plastic straws with paper straws, encouraging, incentivizing reusable cups as to take into cafes and so on. So it became pushing people towards adopting a way of life that did not involve single-use plastics, with mixed success, but some, actually.
You have a smile there, because one of the things that I love about your book is once you start reading waste, it's not small, it's huge.
Yep.
And you can push the lever here. It's kind of like whack-a-mole. There's still so many. So talk to me about that. The fact, like, you had a bit of a smile as you were talking about, people are going after plastic, but you still have like enormous problems when it comes to waste.
Oh, yeah. And just really, plastics are the best example, because they're forever wastes, and they've got very little value. Now, there are ways in which plastics can be recycled, but it's not like a lot of wastes. And because they get into the environment, they just don't break down. They become very dangerous over the longer term. So that's one of our biggest problems. But it's not the only one. We have an increasing awareness now of textile waste. Used clothes, fast fashion, all of the clothes that we just kind of wear once, wash, wear another time, or just wear once and throw away. Teenagers are much more inclined to buy lots and lots of clothes from these stores and just dump them when they don't need them, but also they're just badly made. And so these textiles occasionally or often get sent to, we donate them to Goodwill or places like that, and they wind up in Africa and in huge quantities, where they have, some utility, but actually very little value, and often just simply destroy local clothing, textiles, manufacturing markets, and with it's a very bad effect.
When I look at climate change and we look at these different COPs and you hear people talk about it, and clearly we see all these events going on in the world, you hear so many people saying, look, we're getting to the game rather late. We need to really kind of hit the gas pedal and move on this. And then you kind of see kind of a slow plodding, because it's the world and getting everybody on board. It's not just governments, it's industries, as you're describing. Do you feel the same way when it comes to waste, or do you feel like we are kind of wrapping our arms around it and starting to make moves?
I think we are. Plastics is, I think, a separate case, I think, because it's being dealt with globally as plastics, not necessarily as part of the big waste issue, or it's its own segment of waste. So I do think we're moving. I also do. I think we're moving. I actually think it is not. It's funny. I would write that sentence about climate change moving slowly and plastics being a little faster than that. I would flip that now, because we're getting so aware of how urgent the climate crisis is becoming. And plastics, we realize, we're working on solutions. And I think one of the advantages there is that I think we can actually find them. It's not going to be as cataclysmic, but that's positive. I think governments can move quite quickly if they have the will to do it. It's just not the same as climate change, as the climate emergency. But it is something that I think we can invest in energy and innovation and good policies into and actually make a real difference.
I want to conclude with your conclusion because I thought it made me think. I've been doing recycling for years. We're trying to take the steps, and you talk about that. Maybe we should stop thinking about things as a consumer and start thinking about them as a citizen. And I thought about that, and I thought how powerful that is, because as a consumer, I can throw all those bottles and make sure they get out. But as a citizen, if I am keeping an eye on the government and trying to push them to take action, you can make a lot more headway, right? And I don't think people think that way. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think one of the things I find when I talk about this is people are like, well, what do I do with padded envelopes? Like, I don't know. So I tend to say my general advice is, if in doubt, throw it out, because otherwise it could mess the recycling bin that it's being put into. But generally, yes, I think people need to start thinking about really paying attention to what their local recycling companies are doing, what their local governments are doing. And local governments often need to hear from people to say, hey, we like this. Maybe we're willing to pay more. We want this service. You need to start enacting rules about single-use disposable foodware, starting to think about where you might make those changes. In supermarkets, getting rid of plastic bags. All of these things are things that people can support by supporting local governments, making sure that those rules pass and stay passed. Having said that, I think, there's a lot of support around getting rid of plastics. A big problem in the US today is that the plastic bag lobby has been able to get some state governments around the country to ban restrictions on plastic bags. So it's something like the state of Texas able to say, Austin, progressive city, you can't do anything about plastic bags from the state level. And that's pretty disturbing. That's a trend I tell students. If you come from those states, go spend your summer figuring out what's going on there and seeing what you can do to change that law. So things like that I think are really important.
Fascinating. And for future interviews with Kate O'Neill, I know the question to stump you on is padded envelopes now. So thank you for that tip.
Yeah.
You stumped yourself. I didn't even have to. Thanks so much.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.